Hey guys, Sean here. Welcome to the F1 Word and to the French Grand Prix debrief. Now, that wasn't exactly the greatest race we've ever seen. I don't think anybody will ever claim that it was. However, right from the off, I've got to be completely honest. I think there has been a real overreaction in some parts of the media about it. No, it wasn't great. But those claiming it was the worst race of the year or even the worst race in history have very short memories. Even in 2019, I would say that Spain was far worse and China wasn't much better, if at all. And yes, I know that's not really any consolation. Okay, when it came to the top 5, it wasn't thrilling and only really threatened to come to life with about a lap or two left to go. But before I get on to any of that, let's start by having a quick look at the full and final result. It was Lewis Hamilton who took victory once again, leading home teammate Valtteri Bottas, and Charles Leclerc rounded off the podium. Max Verstappen was 4th ahead of Sebastian Vettel in 5th. Not a great weekend for him at all. Excellent weekend though for Carlos Sainz, who managed to bring his McLaren home in 6th, with Kimi Raikkonen and Nico Hülkenberg 7th and 8th. Lando Norris had mechanical issues towards the end of the race and dropped to 9th in the final classification, and Pierre Gasly took the final point for 10th. Daniel Ricciardo was classified 11th but did actually cross the line in 7th, however a post-race penalty demoted him out of the points. More on that a little bit later. Sergio Perez and Lance Stroll were 12th and 13th respectively, with the two Toro Rossos of Daniel Kvyat and Alexander Albon behind. Antonio Giovinazzi ended up down in 16th, Kevin Magnussen was 17th, and then it's the two Williams boys of Robert Kubica and George Russell, and just the one retirement in France, and that was poor old Romain Grosjean. So as usual, I'll go through some of the talking points and reaction from the top 3 teams before running through the rest of the field, and to be perfectly frank, not really all that much I can say on Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton absolutely dominated from start to finish, a masterclass, and never really looked at any threat whatsoever from those behind, not even his teammate. There were a few moments of, dare I say, concern for the world champion though, as he reported over team radio that something on his seat had broken, and he did suffer some pretty nasty looking blistering on his front tyres towards the end of the Grand Prix. Really, it all looked like a very steady Sunday afternoon drive for Hamilton around Paul Ricard. However, the Brit said post-race that it wasn't as easy as perhaps it looked. I've been racing a long time, but this just never gets old. It is always a challenge out there, and I just love trying to find the edge and really being on top of this machine. This is actually an awesome track to drive in the race. There's some really technical areas. It may look easy from the outside, but it wasn't easy at all. Everything's always on the edge, so when I could, I was saving tyres, saving the engine, saving fuel. I had quite big blisters on my front tyres, which I was a little worried about, but we got to the end and I couldn't do it without this incredible team. I'm so proud of everyone and so proud to be part of this group of people. So Lewis was happy with the results, obviously, but he was also a bit critical of the sport afterwards and described some of the decisions made by those running the sport as bad. He did, though, go on to say that the media and the fans should not be putting the blame at the drivers' doors because ultimately they do not make the rules, and rightly so. But at the same time, I'm sure he can completely understand fans' frustration. Valtteri Bottas was a long way back in the end from Hamilton and only just managed to finish ahead of Charles Leclerc. The Finn was, I would say, comfortably up the road before a late virtual safety car, but then after that the Ferrari began closing in on the Mercedes very quickly. Now Bottas stated that due to some concerns over the state of his tyres, he had to back off, and that will have obviously contributed to the gap closing and perhaps even the gap being as big as it was to Hamilton. But having said that, even prior to that, the world champion was in total control. When he was interviewed after the race, Bottas did also say that Hamilton is not unbeatable and insisted that the battle is still on and he will fight back harder in Austria. As I said in yesterday's race reaction stream, I'm honestly not so sure. It pains me to say this after 8 races, and this is nothing against Mercedes and nothing against Lewis Hamilton. As a neutral, and I'm sure many people feel the same, we want to see this title battle go right down to the wire. But I genuinely do believe that both titles are pretty much already wrapped up. However, as Stewart did point out during yesterday's stream, one bad weekend for Hamilton or even a DNF and things could change very quickly. But it does look very much as though he's on for title number 6. At Ferrari, it was a bit of a lonely afternoon for Charles Leclerc, really. As I said there, he did get quite close to Bottas in the end, and I feel like if he'd had another lap, he may well have got the Finn. He would have at least had a go. But overall, I think Charles did a good job and pretty much did what he needed to do and what most of us probably expected him to do after qualifying. He started 3rd, cemented that position and picked up the points. At the end of the day, the pace just wasn't there to challenge the Mercedes really, prior to Bottas' tyre issues of course. Sebastian Vettel though had a very disappointing Saturday qualifying down in 7th, and the race was not all that much better with the German only recovering to 5th. He did put on a late charge and actually was catching Verstappen quite quickly towards the end of the race, but the team chose to pull him into the pits to put him on some fresh tyres so that he could go for that fastest lap and of course the bonus point that comes with it, which he duly delivered. Post-race though, Vettel branded the Scuderia's weekend in France as a failure. We failed. We wanted to close the gap to Mercedes by a certain amount and we didn't. In that regard, we have to be honest, we failed. But nevertheless, we tried everything we could. Charles' podium is at least a little bit of satisfaction. The bigger objective was to come here and close the gap, but we had to learn that our parts weren't working the way we expected them to. When discussing the reason for going for fastest lap rather than chasing down Verstappen, it was put to Seb that he was only marginally quicker on fresh tyres than Hamilton on old tyres. To that, he rather ominously said that Mercedes clearly have pace in hand. We had to go for it, at least it's one extra point, otherwise I don't think we'd have fought for P4. The pace from P3 to P5 was pretty much the same, so it was quite difficult. It just shows how much pace they have in hand. If they want to, they just go a lot faster. That means there is a lot of work for us, but we need to make sure to get closer to put them under pressure. Now, as you'll see a little bit later on, Vettel now sits a whopping 76 points off the top of the Drivers' Championship table after just 8 races. I don't think anything needs to be added there. It was a good day for Max Verstappen, if a little lonely as well, similar to Charles Leclerc. Red Bull hadn't really shown the pace to contend with Mercedes or Ferrari at Paul Ricard, although having just said that, he did of course beat one of the Ferraris and wasn't all that far behind the other. So perhaps there was more pace there than I'm giving the team credit for, but it's still a massive positive around a circuit they weren't expecting to do well on. But what did the Dutchman think about his race? Well, in Red Bull's post-race press release, that's a mouthful, the Dutchman said the following. The race was a bit lonely at times, but it wasn't boring as I had Charles in sight, which was good motivation to keep trying to match his lap times. You have to keep pushing yourself even if there aren't cars that you are directly fighting. In the second stint we were looking quite good, but with 6 or 7 laps to go I ran out of rear grip and I couldn't really rely on the rear tyres anymore. I think it took a bit too much out of my tyres trying to keep up with Charles early in the race, but I'm pleased to be in front of one Ferrari. The target is always to win, but it was not possible here today and I got the most out of the package. We have made a small step this weekend, but we still need to work on all elements to fight for victories. I have to say, again, I've been really impressed with Max this year. He's matured, he looks relaxed, and he's been driving the wheels off that car. His teammate though, well, he had a shocking weekend quite frankly. Qualified down in 9th despite being on the theoretically quicker tyre, and never really showed any pace during the Grand Prix. Now, he was on the weaker strategy, so that has to be taken into account of course, and the soft tyre really did struggle early on. However, even after he got rid of that set and moved to the hards, his pace was still nowhere. His best lap time in the race was a full second slower than what Verstappen managed. He was another driver who had issues with grip and said post-race that he was struggling with the car as it kept sliding a lot, also adding that the car never felt as bad as it did in France. But lots of drivers suffered with low grip, even his teammate. It just feels like, once again, excuse after excuse from Pierre, and at some point that has to stop and he has to start performing. Of course, absolutely, if he's not feeding the car underneath him, he's not going to be at his best. But the drivers he is expected to be racing against are all able to find ways around that and still put in a performance. We did, by the way, speculate about Gasly's future in yesterday's race reaction stream, so if you'd like to hear a more, I guess, in-depth conversation on the matter, then absolutely do feel free to go and check that one out. I will keep it short here though, and say that Pierre has got to step up and quickly. I'm not convinced that Red Bull will drop him before the end of the season, as the only better option is Kvyat, and I just do not see a situation where Helmut Marko is going to be willing to swallow his pride twice when it comes to the Russian. That being said, you never know with Marko. However, if he doesn't find form and start delivering soon, I am absolutely certain that the team will start looking at other options for 2020 if they aren't already. It was just not good enough at all from Gasly this weekend. Let's move on from the top 3 then and run through the rest of the field, and what a mega weekend for McLaren, and yes, I did just say mega. They locked out the third row of the grid with Lando Norris in 5th and Carlos Sainz in 6th, and the Spaniard even managed to keep hold of that position and deliver some very good points for the team. As I said last night, I know there is still a long way to go, but this weekend has been a big step in the right direction. It wasn't all plain sailing though, as Norris suffered a hydraulic issue with around 20 laps to go, and that meant he was losing time hand over fist, and by his own admission really struggled to drive the car and get it home. All in all though, another very good drive from the rookie, and as I've said a million times already this race weekend, he did his part in what was an exceptional weekend for McLaren. Now, Norris did actually cross the line in 10th place. However, post-race, Daniel Ricciardo was slapped with 2 5-second time penalties, one for leaving the track and gaining a lasting advantage, and the other for, here we go, leaving the track and failing to rejoin safely. The Aussie went for a move on Norris, went deep into turn 8 and left the track. As he rejoined, the McLaren had to take evasive action to, in the steward's view, avoid a collision. Back to this wonderful phrase, by the letter of the law, the black and white rules that the drivers all wanted, it's a penalty. So no arguing with that when it comes to the rules. Once again, the rules are the bigger issue and need to be looked at to allow for close racing. But quite frankly, the world of F1 has been banging on about this for 2 weeks and I have nothing to add to what I've said already since Canada. As for the other one, it's absolutely a slam dunk. He drove off track and overtook Raikkonen with all 4 wheels over the white line. Penalty all day long. I have seen some images of Raikkonen off the track prior to that, but from the replays I've seen, he manages to keep one wheel in contact with the white line at all times, and as I understand it, that is just within the rules. I guess though it depends on how pedantic you want to be. The other Renault of Nico Hülkenberg had a good day recovering to finish in 8th and said that he was pushing all race but struggled to make his way through the traffic early on. Interestingly enough though, he actually says that he feels the car still has pace in hand, so things are perhaps starting to look up a little bit for Renault after what's been, let's be honest, a shaky start to 2019. Down at Alfa Romeo, Kimi was disappointed to miss out on Q3 on Saturday but was happy with the speed in the car during the race. I guess that's where it matters. As already mentioned, he was involved in that final lap drama with Norris and Ricciardo and described that battle as intense. But all in all, just another really good recovery drive from Kimi Raikkonen. Antonio Giovinazzi had a great qualifying as he lined up 10th on the grid, but his race didn't follow the same pattern. As was the case with Gasly, he started on the soft tyre, which was just not good enough for the race, and he had to pit after just 7 laps. That forced him onto a 2-stopper in the end, and with pretty much all of those around him only pitting once, it was always going to be tough to recover from that situation. However, Gio is focusing on the positives from qualifying moving forward. Disappointing weekend for Racing Point, although they were pretty much expecting it. Sergio Perez was slapped with a 5-second time penalty for leaving the track and gaining an advantage on the opening lap. Checo wasn't sure why he was penalised as he did follow the rules to return to the left of the bollard. However, again, as we said last night, ultimately he left the track behind a car and rejoined in front of it. That's a penalty regardless of whether you follow the procedure regarding the bollard or not. Don't get me wrong, I get his frustration, it's chaotic on lap 1, and it can't be easy to keep on top of who you're following and who you're trying to avoid a collision with. But by the letter of the law, oh, bore off Sean, in the end the penalty pretty much ended any slim hope he had of snatching a point. Lance Stroll once again drove well in the race after once again failing to drive well in qualifying. At one point he actually ran as high as 6th after running very, very long during the first stint. However, Lance felt they pitted a little bit too late and believed that had he pitted earlier, basically whilst he still had some pace, he could have finished higher. Daniel Kvyat said he enjoyed some good battling with other drivers and believes that he did the best job possible given the pace or lack of in the Toro Rosso. He did of course also have those penalties which forced him to start from the back, so maybe he could have finished higher, but the Russian admitted that points were pretty unlikely in France. His teammate said that he was boxed out in turn 2 on lap 1 and that compromised his race pretty much immediately. He also admitted that the car lacked pace but made an interesting point about being stuck in what he called the DRS train. Ultimately, because he and everybody around him had DRS, it made it difficult to overtake. He did go on to say, though, that he really enjoyed battling with his teammate throughout the race. Really rubbish weekend for Haas, that is the only way to put it. Kevin Magnussen said that they were helpless in France, and that the pace they were expecting to arrive during the race never turned up. I'm going to say exactly what K-Mag said in the team's post-race press release, there's not much to tell. Romain Grosjean had a thoroughly miserable weekend, and in fairness, he's had a pretty miserable season so far. He retired late on and said that he feels it was the right call, as it allows the team to save some parts, even though it was tough to do so in front of his home fans. Last word from team boss Gunther Steiner, though, who said that the weekend in France was the worst they've had since they started the team. Ouch. And finally, Williams, of course. First off, it was great to see Robert Kubica beat George Russell on track. Yeah, okay, Russell made an extra pit stop, but it will still be a boost to his confidence given how difficult the start to 2019 has been for him. It was also awesome to see them scrapping with each other, and both drivers obviously enjoyed that. Although Kubica did fall short of calling the race a success, but did say that the tyres behaved better than expected, and his Sunday was, quote, alright. Russell's first attempt to pass Kubica didn't go to plan as he hit a marker board and that damaged his front wing, hence the extra stop. However, unseen by the TV cameras, obviously everything seems to be this season, he did later pull off the same move around the outside of his teammate at turn 10 and made it stick. Good stuff. Before I go then, let's have a look at the championship table, starting with the drivers. Lewis Hamilton, 187 points at the top now, with Valtteri Bottas second on 151. Sebastian Vettel is third on 111, with Max Verstappen 11 further back on 100. Easy maths there for Sean. Charles Leclerc is fifth on 87 points. Pierre Gasly, though, just 37. He's got to step up, as I've said countless times already this weekend. Carlos Sainz continues to head that midfield on 26 points. Kimi Raikkonen is 8th on 19. And then it's Daniel Ricciardo 9th on 16, tied with teammate Nico Hülkenberg now. That could get tasty. If you don't believe the Drivers' Championship is done, you probably will with the Constructors. Mercedes 338 points, Ferrari 198 and Red Bull 137. All of that means that after just 8 races, Mercedes now have more points than Ferrari and Red Bull combined. Unbelievable. McLaren are best of the rest on 40 points. Renault now up to 5th on 32 points. That looks better for them. And Racing Point are 6th on 19 points, tied with Alfa Romeo in 7th. Toro Rosso are 8th on 17 points. Haas are down in 9th with 16 points. And Williams, of course, are yet to score in 10th. That is it then for the French Grand Prix debrief. But don't forget, you can let me know your thoughts about yesterday's race in the comment section down below. Now, I will be back soon with more content, and it's already race week once again. So the usual weekend content will be out, starting with the preview and some predictions on Thursday. In the meantime, though, you can follow me over on social media. The links to Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, and of course to Discord are all in the description down below. But as ever, thank you for watching. I've been Sean, this has been the F1 Word, and until next time, goodbye.